1929, a delegation arrived in Rome to meet Italy's Prime Minister, Benito Mussolini. Their leader that day was Ettore Ovazza, a wealthy Turin banker who was immensely proud to meet Mussolini.
He is serene. Seated at his desk, he motions to us to advance. It was the first time I was to see the face of Il Duce up close.
Ovazza was a fervent supporter of the fascists, but he was also a prominent Jew.
On hearing of my affirmation for the unshakable loyalty of Italian Jews to the fatherland, His Excellency Mussolini looks me straight in the eye and says with a voice that penetrates straight down to my heart, "I have never doubted it."
In gamba. Grazie.
What these men have in common is a dream of a greater nation. But the dream will not become reality, and instead Mussolini and his fascist movement will bring about Italy's darkest hour. Mussolini will eventually betray his country, his family, and the man that greets him so warmly that day. For the first time, we reveal the remarkable story of Italian fascism and the extraordinary and tragic tale of the fascist Jews. A story of a disastrous pact with Nazi Germany that would lead to world war and the deaths of 55 million people. A story told for the first time in color. Fascism grew out of the bloody battlefields of the First World War. Austrian forces inflicted a heavy defeat on Italy at the Battle of Caporetto in 1917. Over 500,000 Italian soldiers surrendered or fled. The Italians were forced into a humiliating retreat. Among them was the Turin banker, Lieutenant Ettore Ovazza. After the battle, he was overcome by shame.
My attendant came along beside me, weeping, and asked me, "Where are we going, Lieutenant, sir?" My jaw tightened, and I broke out in tears, and so we retreated.
The war had been a disaster for Italy. Even eventual victory in 1918 brought only muted celebrations. Italy did not gain its expected spoils of war, and the mood of the nation was one of anger and despair. And everywhere was a looming fear of revolution. In Turin, Ettore Ovazza looked out on the city he loved and was enraged by what he saw. He saw not the disciplined society he desired, but the potential horror of a communist revolution. In the city streets below, there was near insurrection, with riots and looting. The middle classes feared their property would be seized. Ettore Ovazza feared revolutionaries would also rip apart the nation he loved. He wrote in his diary,
"In the nation, political hatred spread like wildfire. The young returning home, proud of having fought with honor, many with their brave bodies wounded, were downcast and alone. This cry of anguish was heard by a man who was worthy of it, by Benito Mussolini."
Fromm was in despair.
Every time Hitler grabs a country, he sends me a message.
To keep up with Hitler, Mussolini seized Albania in April 1939. But Italy had now been at war for 10 years, and the strain was beginning to show. The country was bankrupt, military supplies exhausted. Ciano knew the truth.
We must avoid war.
Yet Mussolini ordered his foreign minister Ciano to go to Berlin to sign one of the most disastrous military agreements in history, the Pact of Steel. This required Italy to go to war whenever Germany did. In this agreement, both Germany and Italy promised not to provoke a major European conflict for at least 3 years. But just 3 months later, in Salzburg, Czarno learned directly from Ribbentrop, the Nazi foreign minister, of Hitler's real plans.
He said, gazing at me with his cold metallic eyes,
"We want war. Poland must be invaded, defeated, annihilated, and annexed to the Third Reich in the same fashion as Austria and Czechoslovakia."
After meeting Hitler, Czarno knew for sure that war was inevitable.
he has decided to strike, and strike he will. The fate that might befall us does not interest them in the least.
Czarno felt desperate and powerless.
I returned to Rome completely disgusted with Germany and its leaders. They have betrayed us and lied to us.
But even Czarno could not have guessed what was coming next. Hitler stunned Italy with a political masterstroke. He signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviets, which secretly carved up Poland.
Chopped up into pieces, a fire is lit, and they begin to burn these bodies right there in the schoolhouse. It's one of the strange and extraordinary ironies that among the first victims of the German occupation should be one of the most loyal adherents to fascism.
Ettore was one of the first, but there would be many others. 7th, 1945, Benito Mussolini, his mistress Clara Petacci, and several fascist leaders were seized by partisans. It was to become an ignominious end for the man who had seen himself as Emperor of Italy.
He was just cut down by a burst of submachine gun fire from this communist partisan leader. Very dramatic, very, very brutal, if you like. And then, of course, his corpse and that of Clara Petacci were hung up feet first in the Piazzale, in one of the piazzas of Milan. That may appear very horrible and unjustified, but it has to be said that it was also a sort of symbolic reprisal, because the fascists had previously hung a lot of partisans in that same square.
Senior judges, civil servants, military leaders, and even police chiefs who had served under fascism were allowed to slip quietly back into office. And fascism as a political force did not die with Mussolini.
There is still, right across Italy, a widespread sense of sympathy for this man, an unwillingness to accept that maybe there's a bit more to him than just public works programs, road building and draining marshes. There was a bit more to it than that.
Mussolini's belief in fascism, violence, and a desire for empire left Italy with a terrible legacy of death and destruction. And together with Hitler, Mussolini plunged Europe into the most destructive war in history and changed the world forever.